Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin, dare I say, the greatest anime of all time. Now, I could go on and glaze this anime all day, but that's not what we're here for. In today's video, we're going to be ranking every single character from worst to best, so let's get to it. First up, we got Porco. He hated on Reiner for practically his whole existence in the show, but he did die in a pretty admirable way, so I'm gonna have to give him a solid C tier. Next, we got Captain Erwin, probably one of the best leader characters in anime, and definitely one of my favorites. Easy S tier. Next up, we got Falco. I think Falco is the most stereotypical shonen protagonist-like character in the show, and I do think that perspective is needed because Eren is just such a different character. Then we got Kenny. I think Kenny was such a cool character. His fight scenes were cool, his dialogue was cool, and his whole character was just super dope. Alright, next up we got Colt. Solid older brother character, but aside from that, he wasn't that relevant. Next we got the fake Ymir. I think her character arc was pretty interesting overall. Next up we got Gabby. I think Gabby's character gets a lot of hate for killing Sasha, but I do think her character acted in a way that was really similar to young Eren. Next up we got Annie. Annie's character was pretty cold for the first 3 seasons, but after the time skip, she was pretty much frozen for most of it until the very end. I'll give her a C tier too. Alright, next up we got Peak. You know, she had the cart Titan, which was pretty cool because it was an ugly ass Titan, but she was pretty fine. Next up is Udo and Zafia. They were pretty irrelevant. Next up we got Berthold. Berthold probably had the worst death in the whole show. Well, close to the worst death. Next up we got Marcel. His character is pretty much the whole reason that Porco hated on Reiner. Aside from that, he was pretty irrelevant. Next up we got Eren Kruger. Bro practically showed up for 5 minutes and changed the whole course of the story. A tier. Next up we got Gross, or General Gross or whatever. I hated this character. He was evil as fuck, and I don't think anyone likes him. Z tier. Next up, we got Historia. I know a lot of people online back in the day when Attack on Titan was ending really hated on her character for being wasted potential, but I honestly think her character was alright. I'm gonna give her B tier. Next, we got Marco. He was done dirty. Next up is this general dude. He was just a stereotypical general dude character and became fodder for the Yeagerists movement. Next up, we got Rod Reese. He was just an unlikable character and an unlikable guy. Next up, we got Frida Reese. She was pretty nice to Historia, but she did have the Founder's Titan, which means she had the Founder's Curse, and she was also pretty bad at fighting, so I'll just give her C tier. Next up, we got the previous king. Yeah, he was kind of mid. Next, we got this girl who I thought was going to be a main character because her hair was a different color, but guess not. Then we got Hitch. She was actually one of the few military police to become relevant to the main story. Next up is Kara. I think her character did pretty well for what she was meant to do, which was show Gabby the consequences of her actions, so I'll give her B tier. Next up, we got Lara Tiber. She was the holder of the Warhammer Titan. She got absolutely obliterated by Eren before she even had a chance to have any character development, so I'm just gonna give her D tier. Next we got Commander Pixis. This dude always came through for Eren and the gang when they needed him. Next we got Keith Sades. I think he was alright and his whole background thing was kind of interesting. Next up is Willie Tiber. He was a really theatrical character and he progressed the plot in a pretty cool way, so I'm gonna say he's a solid B tier character. Then there's this dude, I forgot his name, but he was nice to Falco. Next we got Hans. Hans always had good intentions, but he was never able to help out as much as he wanted to. Next up is Arthur Bras, Sasha's dad. This dude was an absolute goat. He had so much compassion in such a cruel world, and I think that automatically puts him at high A tier. Next is Lisa Bras, Sasha's mom, and she was also just such a compassionate character, but I'm gonna have to give her B tier because she did have less screen time and dialogue than Arthur. Next up is the fake king. I'm gonna put him at irrelevant, but I will say that he looked so cold until he figured out that he was completely useless. Next up is Nico. He was the Marleyan chef that was also Sasha's love interest. Seemed like a pretty cool guy, but I'm gonna still have to give him D tier. Next up, we got that one priest dude. Yeah, he was a little weird. D tier. Alright, now we got Historia's mom. She was a horrible mom, so I'm gonna have to give her F tier. Next we got Grisha Yeager. I think his character is so important because for Eren and Zeke's development, he played such a pivotal part. I think his whole character journey was just super cool, and revealing the outside world through his backstory was just such a good way to do it. Next is Carla Yeager. I think the small things that she said to Eren were constantly used to help build up the person he is. I'll give her a solid B tier. Next up is Faye Yeager. What happened to to her really showed Grisha and the audience how cruel the outside world really is. Next up is Onion Compone, who's just super chill, super cool, and super loyal. A tier. Next up is Yelena. Her character was just super interesting for her reasons for doing everything she did, so I'll just give her A tier. Next up is Levi. I think Levi is probably the most badass character in Attack on Titan. He was just cold. S tier. Flock is definitely Aaron's biggest hype man. He was definitely annoying at times, but you know, he did what he did and he did it great. A tier. Next up is Hanji. Her character was just really cool overall and had a bunch of awesome moments. Next up are these two dudes. They were Flock's lackeys, but I didn't really like them, to be honest. Next up is Sasha. I think her character was mainly there for comedic purposes, but she had a lot of heart and her death was super sad. A tier. Yeah, Mikasa's parents, you know, they died in a pretty tragic way, but aside from that, they were pretty irrelevant to the story. Then we got Reiner's mom. I don't think she really had a clue what this dude was going through. Next up, we got Zeke. I think Zeke is just such a good parallel for Eren because they were raised by the same dad, but they went down two totally different paths. And overall, his character was just really deep and complex. Next up, we got Armin. This dude was probably the most intelligent character in the whole show. He was the brains behind the operation for the first 3 seasons, and he was just the GOAT overall. I think his whole sacrifice in the Shigen Sheena arc cements him in S tier alone. Jean is one of the characters with surprisingly the best character development. He went from someone that you hated to someone you absolutely wanted to survive. Connie was just a chiller the whole show, and yeah, I really was rooting for him in the end. Then we got Mikasa. She was a dope fighter and was really badass, but her character was really built around Eren. She did get her chance to shine in the end though. Next we got Reiner. Reiner could not catch a break, and he was just such a complex and well-written character. It's an easy S tier for me. And then, of course, Eren Yeager. I could make a whole video about this dude because this dude was probably my favorite fictional character for like 2 years straight, but we don't got the time for that right now. But all I'm gonna say is one of the best written characters in fiction. And I know a lot of haters are gonna say, oh, the ending this and the ending that, but I do not care. I read the manga from beginning to end as it was coming out, and this shit slapped the whole time. Thanks for watching, and I'll probably make more for other anime.